Hi folks, my perspective here, and this is the second part of the clip, The Gravity Delusion. In this we'll be looking at practical examples that show that gravity and relativity does not work. We'll be looking at speed and distance. So for example, this young boy, he's running and he's pulling this plane around him as he runs. So what distance did the plane travel? Did the plane travel around the boy? Is the plane's distance relative to the boy? So did the plane travel in a circle? No. The distance the plane traveled is when the boy ran from the bottom of the field to when the boy stopped, and the path of the plane would be in a loop. So the distance is not around the boy, but along the boy's path that the boy ran. Now let's look at speed. You see this boy's running and he's flicking this plane around him. As the boy runs, the plane would have to fly faster as it flies in the direction that the boy is running in, and slower when the plane is behind him. Because if the speed is constant, the boy would actually run into the plane. So they'll tell you that the plane speed is relative to the boy. The boy would still run into the plane because the boy is moving. The plane's speed cannot be constant because the boy would run into the plane. So they're applying it to the earth and they're saying, well, the boy is the earth, so a plane flying around the earth cannot travel at the same speed. And what was the distance that the plane traveled? Well, from when the plane took off from the earth, flew around the earth as the earth travels around the sun. And the distance would be when the plane lands. You see, they'll tell you that the distance and the speed is relative to the earth, but it's simply impossible because the earth is spinning around the sun. So how then does gravity, which is pulling the plane towards the earth downward, how does gravity force the plane along its flight path so that the plane continues to maintain its speed relative to the earth as the earth spins? Because the force isn't in front of the plane, but downward. How does gravity pull the plane when the plane's behind the earth, and then pull the plane in front of the earth? You see, because the earth would actually smash into the plane. So the speed and the distance the plane flew, doesn't work. It simply cannot work. Remember the boy, when he's running, he's pulling the plane toward himself. So when the plane is in front of the boy, and the boy's pulling the plane toward him, the boy will run into the plane. Now let's look at speed and distance of this balloon. So the hot air balloon takes off, right? So from the position regarding the earth, the hot air balloon is moving. So when we stand back and we look at the balloon's path around the earth, how is gravity pushing the balloon around the spin of the earth at 1,600 kilometers an hour? And at the same time, how is gravity pulling the balloon along the earth's path around the sun at over 500,000 kilometers? Because gravity is pulling the balloon towards the earth. And realize that it only works if the earth is stationary, and the only momentum that the balloon has is its position as it's flying over the earth. You see, they're trying to tell you that the people in this balloon will only feel the motion they have that is relative to the earth. And you realize it's a con. This is simply impossible. We're being lied to. gravity and relativity does not work. Let's take a helicopter. You see, this helicopter is flying. They'll tell you that the helicopter's position is relative to the Earth. So if I move this Earth around, the motion of the movement plus the helicopter's movement have to be added together. And I'll tell you now, the helicopter will only account for its motion relative to the Earth. It simply doesn't work. Let's take an aeroplane. So this aeroplane takes off, right? It's free from the Earth's gravity because it's flying. So if the Earth had to move upward, well, the Earth would smack into the aeroplane. And if the Earth dropped away from the plane, it would leave the plane behind. If the Earth moved left and right, its movement cannot be transferred to the aeroplane. How? Even from your own experience in an aeroplane, you feel the aeroplane taking off and you feel the aeroplane landing. That's the only motion that you feel when the plane takes off and lands. So they'll have you believe that the ground is traveling easterly at 1,600 kilometers an hour, and as the plane takes off, its position is perfectly maintained in a different direction that the plane is flying in, and you don't feel it. No stress is put on the aeroplane. As the aeroplane turns westerly, the aeroplane doesn't have to fly harder, use more power. But the plane automatically now just flies magically in the opposite direction of the Earth's motion. And if we stand back, here's the airport. So the plane is taking off. So the airplane doesn't have to take into account the spin of the Earth or the Earth's motion as it moves around the sun. See, the plane only magically takes off and lands. That's all you feel. We don't feel the Earth's rotation or its movement around the sun. Whereas we can see that a plane flying westerly and a plane flying from south to north, both planes will experience different forces. And I'll tell you now, these planes just magically move along with the Earth as the Earth spins around the sun. Well, this is not real. This is magic. This is delusional. This is simply impossible. How can this be real? How on earth can people believe this is real? We're being lied to. So, the International Space Station and the Hubble telescope is free from gravity in outer space, yet will move along the Earth equal to the speed of the Earth and the spin of the Earth as the Earth travels around the Sun, and gravity is pulling it towards, and the Earth won't smack into the space station or the Hubble telescope when they're on the position of the Earth's path around the Sun. They'll also tell you that we don't feel the spin of the Earth because our motion is constant. Well, that's totally ridiculous, because your motion is in a circle and you're spinning at an angle of 23.4 degrees, at an angle across the path of the spin. So therefore your speed cannot be constant. How can your speed be constant? It simply cannot. Your direction and the angle around the spin as the Earth spins around the Sun is angled across the face or across the path that the Earth spins around the Sun. Your speed cannot be constant. This is impossible. I'll also tell you that the Foucault pendulum measures the rotation of the Earth. Well, the Foucault pendulum, how come this pendulum doesn't measure and doesn't reflect the angle of the Earth's spin as it changes angle from one side to the other side as it orbits the Sun, and doesn't measure the Earth's movement around the Sun? It only measures the Earth's spin and magically ignores the motion of the Earth as the Earth spins around the Sun. We see that this is a trick. And the Moon? You see, the Moon's phases are constant, but the Moon, its path is actually a loop. So the speed, when it's on the opposite side, cannot be the same speed on the other side as the Earth spins around the Sun. Therefore, the phases cannot be constant. Then we realize that we're being misled. Now, in the last clip, I'll be concentrating on the Michelson-Morley experiment and show how this is just simply trickery. And we're going to look at that in detail. So we won't look at it now, but the point is that Michelson and Morley and Einstein, the theory of relativity, go hand in hand. We're being lied to by a powerful organization that rules the Earth. An organization made up of Freemasons. All the world rulers all belong to this club. They control the education system, they control the media. Everything that you see and read is under their control. Anybody who contradicts them is called a fool. You see, there are real scientists, like behind Albert Einstein, behind him to his left is Nikola Tesla. But all his writings and his experiments were all confiscated. They aren't made public. You and I don't have access to what he wrote. You see, he's put in the background, and they put a lot of puppets in front of him. So there are real scientists, and the only true scientists in the world today are engineers. These engineers today are displaying true science. So, if I'm in my garden and I put on a water sprinkler, I'll notice that the water drops give no indication of motion. So now I pick the water sprinkler up and I spin that water sprinkler around me. Now immediately I'll notice that the water drops will indicate motion. So if I do it quickly, you'll see the motion. If I do it slowly, the water drops will indicate the motion of the water sprinkler. But they will have you believe that this water sprinkler is spinning around the Earth at 1,600 kilometers an hour at the equator and at over 500,000 kilometers as it moves around the Sun. But this water sprinkler will only indicate motion when you pick it up. And when you move the water sprinkler around, then it will show the movement that you place on the water sprinkler. You see, and you realize this is rubbish. They're lying to us. So the water sprinkler, when you're not touching it, is spinning at 1,600 kilometers an hour easterly and doesn't give any indication of this motion. But when you pick it up and you move it north and south, oh yes, then it will only show that motion, but not the motion easterly. And at the same time, this water sprinkler is traveling at 500,000 kilometers at over that speed, faster than a rifle bullet, and that the earth won't move into the water droplets, smack into the water droplets, and behind, the water droplets won't move away from the earth. You realize that this is fairy stories. This is ridiculous. How can people believe this? So, what do I observe? I take my camera outside and the water sprinkler's on. I notice how the water behaves when it lands on the plants and it sticks to the leaves, right? And I observe how the motion of the water droplets only reflect the motion of the water sprinkler, and that these water droplets on this leaf of this alocasia, will only show the motion when the wind blows the leaf, but these water drops won't show the spin of the earth or reflect any motion of the earth traveling at over 500,000 kilometers around the sun. The water drops will only show the motion when the wind blows the leaf. Then it becomes clear that the earth is not spinning. You see, they'll tell you that the motion on this water droplet is relative to the earth. Well, because the earth's not spinning, the earth's not moving. And all you need to do is pay attention to the earth around you, look and think. So they'll tell you now that you and I are not equipped. You see, the Creator gave us our eyes and our brain, but somehow we have to wait for one of their geniuses like Michelson or Albert Einstein to come along and explain the earth that we live in. We're just too stupid to understand it. And you see, well, that's intimidation, and they are liars and they are fraudsters. They'll give you a guy who they say is a genius, and this is his geometry to explain how you can see the horizon on a curve of the earth. But when you apply it, you'll see that the plane would have to travel at an angle for the pilot to keep the horizon level with his plane. This is mindless garbage. And an aeroplane flying in the same direction, flying easterly, now its angle to the surface will change, and now its path will be a straight line. And as it moves south, still flying in the same direction, will turn in the opposite direction while still flying in the same direction. And yet the pilot doesn't notice this. So the plane flying in the same direction will turn to its left. When it gets to the equator, will fly in a straight line, and past the equator, flying in the same direction, will now turn to its right. And somehow the pilots don't notice this. And we find it in real life. Whether you're flying north or south, your angle to the surface of the earth is constant. It's the same. It does not change. Therefore the earth has to be flat. Doesn't matter how high the pilot flies or how low he flies, his angle from his takeoff position, his X and Y axis to the surface, is constant right through his entire flight. This tells you, this is simple, this tells you that the earth is flat. So in the next episode we'll be looking at the Michelson-Morley experiment, and we'll be looking how this is just a total fraud. So cheers and thanks for watching.